All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, when I watch football today, all I can do is fantasize about what type of numbers some of the most prominent quarterbacks when I was a child will put up today if they had the rule changes that these quarterbacks today have. Quarterbacks like Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, Jim Kelly, Steve Young, these guys would all throw for 4,500, 5,000 yards, 5,500 yards today, easy, with no problem. I remember Jim Kelly in the K-gun offense. I remember Warren Moon in the run and shoot. These guys were throwing for 4,000, 4,200, 4,300 yards back then. And, of course, the great Dan Marino. They were doing that back then when the cornerback basically could put his hand in the receiver's pocket and run with him down the field. Nowadays, they'd have a field day. Well, Warren Moon was able to be a relatively effective quarterback well into his mid-40s. So he would know better than most whether or not Tom Brady is starting to fall off. And he was not shy in sharing his view or his perspective on where Tom Brady stands at this point in his career. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Hall of Fame quarterback Warren Moon had some interesting comments about Tom Brady. Speaking with Bleacher Report for a story about Brady in his 40s, Moon said the following: "I don't think you fall off a cliff, but it is gradual. And once that gradual decline starts, there's no turning back from it. It's not like you're going to recapture what you had before. I don't think he'll be able to go back and have another off season where he can get back to the form he was 2 years ago. It's going to continue to keep sliding, and you just have to continue adjusting your game."
Let me say this very quickly. I agree with Warren Moon for the most part. I think that when you're a great quarterback, you slide down incrementally. I don't think that it's ever going to be this stark. All of a sudden, you just hit a cliff and you can't play anymore. You just fall over it, like Max Kellerman says. But I will say this: every quarterback is different. Because Brett Favre, he hit a cliff. And, you know, sometimes, depending on how much damage you've taken over the course of your career, you can hit a cliff. Now, Warren Moon was one of the great throwers of the football that I've ever seen. If I had to make a list of the best throwers of the football that I've ever seen, Warren Moon is right there with Marino. He's somewhere in the ballpark right there with Aaron Rodgers, so on and so forth. The problem with him was that when Warren would get to the playoffs, he would always come up short, man, and he would always throw big interceptions. And sometimes the balls that he would throw would sail. Of course, for those of us who go back far enough, we remember that at one time, his Houston Oilers went to play the Buffalo Bills, and they were up something like 31-0 at the half. And the Buffalo Bills came all the way back with their backup quarterback, Frank Reich, who's now the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, at the helm. And they defeated the Oilers in Buffalo. And that was just one of a bevy of very disappointing games that the Oilers would have in the playoffs. They would go 11-5, 12-4 in the regular season. Like I stated, they had the run and shoot offense with Ernest Givens and Haywood Jeffries at wide receiver. And once again, they get to the playoffs and they fold up. The run and shoot Houston Oilers were one of the first teams to have 4 wide receivers out there on the field at one time all together. I'm trying to remember what their names were. I remember Ernest Givens. I remember Haywood Jeffries and a couple of other guys. One of you brothers can correct me in the comments.
Max,
Yep.
since you're the expert in cliffs, I'll start with you. What do you make of these comments
Well,
about Brady?
everyone's clearly responding to my cliff comment now. When I originally made it, I said Tom Brady would...
I don't think they responded to your clip comment because what Warren Moon stated actually was contrary to your comment. What Warren Moon was stating is that he sees slippage, which many NFL pundits have stated over the course of this season, that they see slippage in Tom Brady. I've been saying that myself.
Would be a bum in short order. I came back the next day and said I regretted saying bum, not only because I don't want a name call, but also
Oh, please, you don't care about name calling.
because I didn't mean he would be no good at all. I mean, by cliff, I meant Tom Brady's up here, like, you know, at the very top, and he would just be middle of the pack kind of guy very soon. And I put...
Tom is not middle of the pack. By no metric is he middle of the pack. As of right now, what Tom Brady is somebody who's not the great Tom Brady that he was at one point. Now he's just a good Tom Brady, which still makes him one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, if not higher.
Put the outside date at this season, age 41, because no one in the history of football, Stephen A., had ever been good at this season except Warren Moon, who was a Pro Bowler at this age, and then fell off the cliff that Warren Moon says doesn't exist.
Warren Moon was a genetic anomaly. Right? He was one of the great natural athletes to compete at the quarterback position. I mean, he was somebody who played in the USFL for most of his 20s, came into the NFL in his 30s, and still was dominant.
went from Pro Bowl to cut in a year. And when he starts saying, I'm seeing Brady and the legs are going, it's not the arm, it's the legs. And there is decline here. There's going.
Well, Tom Brady's never had good legs. I mean, he's always had legs like a baby giraffe. He's not really saying anything with that.
There's going to be decline very soon that people will notice, and I've already noticed it. I think we've got to take that seriously.
Well, listen, here's the deal.
What I've always stated in regards to Tom Brady is I've noticed that he's been very inaccurate on his deep throws. And I think that Belichick has tried to hide a lot of the erosion that he himself has noticed pertaining to Tom Brady by making sure that he keeps the passing game very short. Because whenever Tom tries to throw the deep ball, he's very inaccurate.
I'll take Warren Moon's comments very, very seriously. Max, it's different than your comments. Respectfully, the bottom line is you called them a bum. He said he would be a bum before you retracted that statement because you didn't want to be that harsh, which we totally respect, and we got that. But you gave the impression that he was just going to plummet. What Warren Moon is alluding to is a gradual decline, meaning that it may take years for somebody to be better than him. It's just that he's not going to be what we all have seen him be.
Agreed.
Throughout the vast majority of his illustrious career. This year, thus far, he's completing 65% of his passes. He's got 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. There's about 25 jobs, at least in the National Football League, where you have quarterbacks that ain't doing that.
Thank you, sir. That's why I've stated that Tom Brady is still a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. No doubt about it.
And so, again, when Warren Moon says it, we get it. At the end of the day, in my opinion, if you are good enough to beat the vast majority of folks out there to end up in the Final Four of the National Football League, to get to another NFC, AFC championship game, or a Super Bowl, or even win a Super Bowl title, that ain't falling off the cliff.
Well,
that might be a decline, like Warren Moon said, but that ain't falling off the cliff.
I would say this. The fall has not been as precipitous as I anticipated. Okay. He's still not middle of the pack, but let's wait till the end of the season. Remember I said, Peyton Manning won a Super Bowl after he fell off the cliff because he was smart enough and on a good enough team. And
right, Max Kellerman, I get it that you're trying to drive home the point that you've been trying to make about Tom Brady over the last 2 years, but you're just going to have to acquiesce and understand that you're pretty much going to be proven incorrect. And to try to compare Tom Brady this season to what Peyton Manning was in his last season with the Denver Broncos, where he won a Super Bowl, I mean, it's rather idiotic. Peyton Manning was barely a starting quarterback in the NFL in his last season. That's why they benched him for a portion of the season. Even with the super brain that he has, his physical output was so poor that they had to sit him down on the bench for Brock Osweiler. I mean, it was terrible. Have there been any conversations about benching Tom Brady? No. So let's not go there with that comparison.
And let's not forget, the reason the Patriots are always in the playoffs, it's not just Belichick and Brady's excellence. Nate, let's list the quarterbacks who played in the AFC East throughout Brady's career and in recent years.
Well, that's a half-decent point, but you know what, Max Kellerman, that would be a point that one would consider weightier if Brady had a bad record against the top teams in the AFC over the last 15 years. And for the most part, he's dominated them as well. Look at his record against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look at his record against the Kansas City Chiefs and many of these other teams. The team that he struggled against the most has been the Denver Broncos.
The answer is nobody. There's zero competition at the position,
but that's not,
which is the most important position, so they have a free pass to the playoffs every year.
Yeah, but that's not what you were alluding to when you brought up the cliff. You weren't alluding to the other quarterbacks in the AFC. You were looking at the whole NFL because we know what the AFC East is.
Let's put it this way.
Understand that. That's all
is he still Tom Brady? Is he still Tom Brady? Is he arguably the best quarterback in football? No, he's.
Yes, I do think that he's still Tom Brady to a degree. And you could argue that he's the best quarterback in football. He's not having the most illustrious season. But whenever you start talking about a top 5 guy, and I'm sure that Max Kellerman will say, well, he's not a top 5 guy. But whenever you start talking about a top 5 guy, he's somebody who's in the argument for best quarterback in the AFC. Max Kellerman is trying to act like he's Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning, I think, threw more interceptions than touchdowns his last year with the Broncos. Tom Brady is throwing touchdowns to interceptions at almost a 3-to-1 clip.
No, he's not. Is he in the MVP conversation right now? No, he's not.
No.
Right, but your boy's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is not in the MVP conversation either. Is he falling off?
No, I'm saying, but he is still Tom Brady in terms of being a winner, winning enough games to get you to the postseason and possibly another AFC Championship game. That's not falling off the
Three more regular season games plus the playoffs. Let's see how it plays out.
So now you want more time.
Oh, boy, yes, he clearly wants more time because he's desperate. Max Kellerman would rather have his tongue cut out of his mouth than say he was wrong.
No, let's see it.
Well, you know what, let me not say that because he did admit that he was wrong about Kyrie.
Let's see at the end of the year what's what. And if he's closer to the middle of the pack, then I'll have been right.
A lot of hits this year. You guys got one more.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see what happens with Mr. Tom Brady. I just thought that it was very interesting that Warren Moon, who was basically the last quarterback who played at a high level into his 40s, would chime in with that assertion or his statements about Tom Brady being on the downside or being noticeably diminished. But anyway, peace.